So in this demonstration, we're going to show you how to use Conform's procedural model generation system to do better looking buildings in Conform. So I have downtown Pittsburgh here, and I just dragged and dropped a building shapefile into the system. And by default, it treated those as buildings and just made them flat. So the first thing that we can do is tell it how to get the height attribute. And so we're going to tell Conform that the height is actually the column, attribute column mean in this particular case. And so we can see all the buildings pop up into their just default looking texture facades. So now let's kind of switch over and look at how we can use scripts to improve the look of these buildings. So we have a companion tool called the PMGL inspector. And this is used to inspect and kind of create new scripts and evaluate existing ones. So we have a downtown Pittsburgh one here that we're looking at. And I can adjust the fidelity level in this thing to bring down the polygon count as low as I'd like. And let me just bring it all the way back up. So that's nice for having levels of detail in your game. We can also control variants. The variants kind of store preset input attributes to the script. Here are all the low-level input attributes for this particular script. Let me jump over to the script itself just so you can kind of get a sense of the language, sort of outside the scope of this demo to teach you how to write these scripts, but it's these are all the input attributes to it, and this is sort of what the language looks like for creating your own scripts. It's actually a little bit maybe intimidating at first, but it's actually pretty straightforward for anyone to learn how to create these scripts. Here's a couple other Pittsburgh commercial buildings that we created and switching between some of the variants. From this tool, you can cycle through the various texture layers that are applied. In the script itself, you can assign any number of texture layers that you want onto the geometry. In this case, we have normal maps and dirt maps and the base diffuse texture. We also did a residential building. Let's take a look at that. So now let's jump back to Conform and talk about how we connect these two things together. So let me go back to the 3D preview settings for the building shapefile. And you can see here we have this schema setting, and it's set here to a commercial right now. We could set all of the buildings in that same layer to use one particular script, but instead of doing that, I'm actually going to tell it to look for the script name in a particular attribute column of the shapefile, which is called PMGS. So let me bring up the attribute table, and I'll find that PMGS column, and you can see that it's all just set to commercial right now, which is the default style that we're rendering right now. So let me select on this particular tall building and find that in the attribute table and make this layer editable. And now I'll update this column name to use one of that Pittsburgh commercial script that we just showed you, and hit enter, and you can see that it updates in the 3D preview right away. So if you'll recall, when we were in the PMGL inspector for each of the feature classes, we could have had any number of variants. And so you may be wondering how it picked which variant. So you can either set it explicitly just to use one particular variant, or you can have it randomly cycle between those variants. So randomly cycling is very nice when you're selecting multiple buildings. So let me select these 3 buildings that are right in front of our view here and knock them all to that same Pittsburgh commercial script. And you can see that they all kind of randomly selected which variant to use, so we didn't get a completely uniform look. And so now finally, why don't we go out of the downtown area and we'll go over to a residential area. And let me move the 3D preview over to be looking in this area. And by the way, this imagery, we're just using a base map from Bing, not very high resolution. But we find this building here. Looks like it's a house at the end of a cul-de-sac. And so we'll select on that, and let's switch it over to use residential. And there we go. So you go through this whole process where you can select, any number of buildings at the same time and map them to new scripts or existing scripts that come with Conform. And then finally, you can then export it out into your game engine or whatever your runtime system is. Thank you.